Hey everybody, it's Jim here, and today is going to be an episode of the Audiomo podcast, co-hosted by Ian, returning for his second visit. I just wanted to set the podcast up because before I hit record on this thing to get it started, we're having such a good conversation. So it's going to come in midway through that conversation, and it's going to be about football. But I promise, stick around for the first, I think, 2 or 3 minutes, and it will tie around to music and practice and guitar and forming good habits. So, without further ado, I hope you enjoy.
Right. You're right. You have to work on all the stuff. The people that I always knew were going to be really good when even if you're playing 5 or 7 aside, the people that sat and stretched for the entire workout beforehand. The people that really stretched, did light jogging, sprints, little suicide runs and stuff like that, and then just stretch, almost nothing with the ball, and then just basic passes to get the body going. I'm like, okay, that person, they're going to be a good player, or at least they're going to be competent. I don't have to worry about anything from them, and I could trust them as a teammate. The people that are working on this dumb shit, you see it a mile away. You're like, oh, I don't want to pass you the ball. That ball's going to go to the moon. If you try and kick it, you are just going to do something terrible with it, and there's nothing I can do about it. So I'm just going to have to compensate.
Yeah,
But it
it's
is
so
fun.
hard. It's so hard because, like I said, it makes you laugh, but you just kind of, I remember saying to someone who was a bit younger than us, because obviously we're all like older now, and it was someone's younger brother, and he was a bit like that. And I said to him, like, I was like, I'm not trying to be a dick, but I was like, you've just got to remember this is a team sport. And it's like, it doesn't matter how good you are on your own individually. It really, if you can't play as a team, you're fucking useless to me. Like, and anyone here. And I was like, I'm not saying that. I don't care how many stepovers you can do. I'm like, it's not going to impress me. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, I've watched Ronaldo live multiple times. You're not getting higher than that. So let's just pass the ball, okay? Like, and it's kind of that. And I love the enthusiasm. And obviously, it's a joy when people do a bit of skill and it works off. But I'm like, there's a different thing. If you're 4 or 5 nil up and you want to do one little bit, I mean, I'd still say, round
No,
zero.
that's the worst time to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd still would say, no. Yeah, exactly. Because you've got nothing to lose. But I was kind of like, it's just that hard thing. And it's like, I get that people want to impress people or, but I just think, if you can't pass the ball, don't do anything else. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, just go and work on that first and foremost. Like, if you can't make a 7-yard through pass in between two defenders, you've got work to do. And I don't give a shit what else is in your repertoire. Like, just go work on that. Like, and we'll talk from there, And it's kind of, yeah, it does make me laugh. It does. It's just an interesting thing about people's attitudes, isn't it? Again, it's like the shortcut thing. They want to be seen as the skillful player without actually having any attributes. Similar sort of thing.
This is perfect because you don't realize what I've just done here. It's the same thing, music. And I'm gonna leave. We're gonna do a hard cut into this conversation. People are gonna be like, "What are they talking about football? How does this have anything to do with music?" It has everything to do with music, and here's why. When you go out to play with people, and it's your first time, like really in an environment like that, if you haven't practiced the right things, as far as if you don't have the fundamentals down to be sound, to work as a unit, it doesn't matter if you're the best player in the world. You have to be able to work with others, to adapt to a situation, to recognize basics. We were talking about leaving a ball or calling for a pass or knowing a time and a place to do certain things. Music is exactly the same. So if you're just going to be, even if you're just jamming with people, you have to take signals. There are little signals that you pick up on the more that you do it. And the thing is, if you focus so much on, I have to become this great of a player, I have to learn how to play this solo or this riff or whatever it is, that's all fine and well. When you're by yourself, great, you can play it. But it's a lot different when you have a drummer behind you, when you're communicating with the bassist, with another guitarist, with keys, forget it. It is an entirely different ballgame, and it's the same as practicing trick shots off the crossbar by yourself with nobody else there versus you try that shit in the real world. Try that shit when there's actually other people on the pitch with you. Good luck with that. People are not going to like you. People are going to look at you like, I don't want to jam with that guy because he's all about himself. He's not about the actual music. And yeah, that's it. So welcome to today's podcast. I know that this was a very, very interesting roundabout way of getting into it. But the thing I like about Ian, why wanted I have Ian back on? It was such a free-flowing conversation, and my only regret to this beginning here is I didn't hit record sooner. I should have immediately hit record because there was a lot of gold that actually you're not going to hear because, I was a little late to the party, but I was rushing like a child. I was like, click, record, now, do it. But, and I'm happy you're on. And am I that far off here with my analysis?
No, not at all. Thanks for having me back on. But no, that's exactly it. I think it's, like we were just sort of talking about, there are a lot of parallels between the passions, we have, like football and music. And it's, play to the music, play the song, play the game of football. And I think the joy comes from understanding that whole game, that whole song. And I think, it's one thing to indulge. And if you're on your own or whatever, and you want to indulge, that's fine. But that's a very, very small piece of the overall puzzle. And I'm not going to tell anyone what to do, but there's a great deal of difference between, in football, being able to do 100 keep ups and a Rabona versus being able to play football, in the same way that there's a great deal of difference between being able to nail the solo to your favorite song and play the song with other musicians, or play multiple songs with other musicians. And I think as long as you understand what you're doing, that's and why you're doing it, that's important. But it's kind of, I wouldn't, how many people would at the start just learn the solo to Sweet Child of Mine and then say they were a good guitarist and then go, okay, do anything else, or whatever.
Yeah. Well, the other problem that I always had with that, and why I'm not a lead player, is because I never wanted to go about learning things that way, because it had nothing to do with guitar, believe it or not. It had to do with the fact that I started playing drums first. When you just learn something verbatim, say the Sweet Child of Mine solo, that's what you just mentioned, so we'll just go with that, right? If you're playing in a live environment and, say you wanted to play that solo, that's cool. After that solo ends, there's something that might happen afterwards called vamp, where maybe they look at you like, that's cool. Why don't you just 4 or 8 more bars? And you won't know. They're not going to communicate that in such direct forms. So when you just learn something like in an X way, it can almost get awkward when that section of a song is over, because it's like, okay, I learned exactly what to do. Now what? The rest of the band just didn't stop playing because you finished your solo. The rest of the band is still going, and you have to now either transition away to make it into a different section of the song and know how to do that. And that's where the theory comes in, because if you don't understand why the notes work together in the solo to begin with, or the progression works, you're going to have a hard time doing that. Or B, changing focus to somebody else to have, their kind of time in the sun, whether it is the other guitar player, the singer, who gets enough attention as it is, but we'll leave that as a B, or, even the drummer. God forbid, give the drummer a little bit of time once in a while. But it's all the things that work together. It's just like football. It really is. It's just like football. And how you practice and how you learn and the skills that are important to you, it will say a lot about your own goals, whether that's good or bad. And it's all about identifying your own goals. But in order to work as a team and as a unit and be really strong with that, even with complete strangers, because I'm sure you've had situations, Ian, where you've sat in for the first time with people. We've all done it. And you've just played. And your preparedness has probably done you well enough where nobody's looking at him like, yeah, I'm never having him back.
Yeah, totally. And you know what? Sometimes that's a really good way. I mean, it's very in the deep end, and I think it depends on your how long you've been playing and personality. But sometimes that going up, like a jam night, especially if everyone's older than you, and they're like, we're just going to do like this, and you kind of the first time you do it, you kind of go. I remember doing it with my guitar teacher when I was about, oh God, I must have been about 19, 20. And it was in this beer garden. It was like a summer thing. And he'd been playing. And he was like, oh, do you want to play? And it suddenly occurred to me that he was into entirely different music from me. And everyone around him was his age. So it wasn't until I was literally holding my guitar facing a beer garden audience. In my head, I was like, crap, this is different. But it's a great way to learn, because then you are really testing, there are points, and again, being honest with yourself afterwards and kind of going, was I guessing that bit and did I get away with it, or did I actually know what I was doing? And the answer sort of for me at that point laid somewhere in between. There was bits I understood and, like little comfort zones I was in. And then when I did veer a little bit to try and push that, and that, was moderately successful, but I came away going, actually, there's more I need to learn about this. And I think maybe that's why he asked me to do it, because I think, the next guitar lesson, I was like, I didn't really get this bit. Like, can you help me? Or whatever. Or I was, I felt like I was sort of tripping up down a hill and I was going to fall over at some point, but we just, and I think that, that's really good. But yeah, you have to. And I think that, between the two, I guess maturing as a musician, I think when you're playing with other people is realizing it's not all about you. Like you say, something happens after the solo stops if you're a lead player, or the big run if you're a singer, or the massive fill if you're a drummer. Something else happens and is happening simultaneously, and it's going somewhere. And you have to be aware, I think, of where it's going. And I think it's a big theme of life. The same, with football as a team sport or work. Not everything's about you, and that can really suck to find out at some points in your life, especially if you put a lot of work in to the thing. But it's true. Like it doesn't matter. Like it's not always about you. And yeah, I think accepting that is kind of crucial to. I think it's kind of the difference between someone who's more mature in whatever it is they're doing. I think it's maybe an acknowledgement of that.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. One of the funniest gigs and one of the most challenging gigs that I ever did. One of my buddies, this was about, oh God, it was before my daughter was born. So this had to have been about 7 years ago. I got a call the day before, okay? And it was to play a major wedding thing. And it was just the one, it was normally a duet. Or two piece really, because there was no singer. One of the best flamenco guitarists I had ever heard. I had not heard him until that point though. Okay, his second guitarist could not show up. They said I kind of was referred to, and it's just like, just can you bring an electric guitar that has a vibrato on it, and just you don't bring any drive. You're just gonna play clean the whole time. And I'm like, okay. And they're like, I'm like, well, what are my standards? Are we playing jazz standards or blues standards, playing whatever? And just like, just come with basic like autumn leaves style stuff and you'll be fine. Now, if you know what autumn leaves is, automatically you thinking to yourself, like I was thinking to myself, okay, I'm just going to be playing a bunch of jazz. Yeah, no big deal. I show up to this gig. I have 20 minutes before we're supposed to start because it's Southern California traffic. Okay, everything is set up really late. We're filing through. There's all the people in the thing, and I'm talking to this guy, and I just kind of like, I'm just like, we'll just make sure we're in the same tunings together. And I saw he had the fingernails of doom, which is a sign that you're about to be playing with somebody very serious, an older dude. And he's like, what do you want to do, man? And I'm like, is there anything in particular you want to do? I'm like, we could just run through this, because one of the nice things about doing gigs like that is you're somewhat background music, but it's also like a storyteller kind of thing. He's like, can you follow me? And I said, I think so, because I was like, I don't know. Like I had never played with this guy before. I don't know what I'm in for. I was playing a Gretsch, not even a Fender. I had the Gretsch with me, and I'm just like, yeah. I'm like, I'll follow you. So we start up, and he's just like, we'll play Autumn Leaves first. After maybe like 3 minutes into it, he says, modulate it to C. And I go, okay. Because we were playing it in D for whatever reason. He says, modulate it to C. And I'm like, okay. Once he tested me and he saw I could do that, the whole rest of the gig, right before, he would just really like kind of whisper something over, just the basics of it, or a 5-2-1 or something like that, and then just say the letter. And we would just look at each other, and I was able to make it through the whole gig because I was understanding of the guy's motion, and just like the eye signals and everything like that. The crowd thought we had played together multiple times, and it was an instance of me being like, okay, my job tonight is to just support this guy. This guy's going to do all the heavy lifting and the majority of the stuff. My job is to support him. And I bring this story up because if this gig had happened 10 years prior to that with me, it would have been a total disaster. It would have been a disaster because not only for the fact that I would have been, not as good of a musician at the time and been able to just quickly follow like that, I would have been finding ways to insert myself more forward into it, because that's how, I don't know, maybe that's how I would have looked at it. And that's not to say I didn't have a few fun thrills here and there. He let me kind of riff off a little bit, and he was really happy with that. But I mean, if you're putting yourselves in these environments, first of all, it makes you a way better musician, but it's sink or swim. It really is sink or swim. So I just thought that was a funny story. I never told that story before. That was fun.
Yeah, no, definitely, and that's the thing. I think those moments, and funnily enough, I was actually watching some content earlier in the week about. I'm certainly no expert when I say this, but I've been looking at little things about the science of learning, particularly as you get older. And they were saying that sink or swim, and you've got a certain amount of experience, and it kind of the chemicals and like hormones it releases actually helps you learn quicker when you're in that like fight or flight, but you've got the expertise to at least give a go at fighting for it. So you'll kind of learn some more. They said that actually that the neuroplasticity, that's the word I was searching for, it actually means that your brain will accept anything new, any new information that you may not accidentally, but you may stumble upon, in those sort of changes or whatever. They can become like a bigger part of your playing. So actually the theory behind it was sometimes putting yourself under pressure in learning situations with the right balance, of course, can be quite useful. So you can get to a point where you go, I kind of want to use this. I'm on the edge of sort of understanding it, but maybe not remembering it, which is a big issue for me, particularly as I've got older, to be honest. So I was looking at ways to put that little bit more pressure on, to push myself that little bit more and sort of go a bit further forward. And I think, sometimes situations like that you've described are absolutely brilliant because you're playing with someone who, it's their thing. Like you say, you're supporting them. And then it's kind of as much about attitude and expertise in sort of balance at that point in time, but also you're getting that opportunity to kind of to work a different way because of that scenario, because perhaps in other gigs you're more at the forefront, or you're at least dictating the material more. So sometimes I think that's a really good way to step outside your comfort zone, because it's then not only out of your comfort zone, it's to a degree outside of your control as well, which I think, I think that can be something that's often overlooked, because of course we all like to have control. I say this as someone who very much doesn't like to not be in control, but sometimes it can be beneficial. It can be, I think especially when it comes to learning and stuff. So yeah, it's a really interesting story, and I've definitely I've had a few, not quite to that degree to be honest, but a few, like say that one with my guitar teacher, and a few jams. And when you get those guys that are at a jam night have kind of been up there like 90% of the time, and then you then really feel like you're stepping into their space. It's not like all the musicians that have changed around all night. You're like the other guy who's like 30 years younger than the youngest one, and you can see what happens. You can see the eyes as you go up, and that sometimes that pressure can be fun, because like you said, it's a little bit sink or swim, like in terms of whether they're going to accept you in your own playing and whether you want to do it again or but it's good to, I think.
But what's funny is, and that example was the most difficult one for me that I gave you. But that's not always the case. And you were just talking about an instance where maybe a whole band is jamming for the whole night, and then you're just the guy who awkwardly comes in for like a song or two. A totally kind of similar thing here in an environment that was not a wedding party. There was a bar I used to frequent called Muldoon's in Orlando, Florida. That was the diviest of the dive bar. But they always had live music, and they kind of had like a house band, and people would come up and sing an Aussie song in a terrible key or something like that. But they would always play Everlong. But their drummer was an older guy. He couldn't ride the hats as fast enough to do it the whole time. He would make it through the first verse, but then through the second verse, he was drinking all night. By the time it got really sloppy. So one night I had a few drinks, and I just pointed. I was just like, give me a six. And I went up and I did it. And then every night I would go not every night, but every time that the band would be up there that week, I would come in and I would just play Everlong, just totally straight. Whatever. And sometimes we would jam a song or two after, just whatever. And I'm just like, okay, I'm done. I'm out of here. That's it. It could be as simple as something like that. So if you do learn a song verbatim, it can be useful. But what I want to talk to you about, and what I want really to focus on here, is we talk so much about gear. We talk so much about what we like and dislike with that kind of thing. I feel like the language of music, not just in the theory sense, but the being able to communicate with other musicians, is really the heart of this conversation we're having right now. So if you were talking to your younger self, all right, that was just maybe a year into it, 2 years into it, really just trying to figure things out, some things, but you don't know everything yet. What advice would you give yourself to learn the language of music and learn the language of communicating with other musicians?
Oh yeah, I mean, definitely the first thing that comes to mind immediately is back to that theme of like this is bigger than you, as in like pay attention to other people. Like when I first started, other than, you know, being like, oh, that guy's a good drummer, I like him or whatever, in my band, I never paid attention to like what the drums were doing unless it directly impacted like me, like a change in the song. And it all came from that place, to be honest with you, of ego, like that sort of learning, because I'm thinking, well, I'm trying to, you know, figure out my own instrument, so I just need to know, you know, when the big fill's happening, I'm going to the chorus and stuff like that. But if I could tell my younger self anything, with all the other people in any band you're in, pay attention to what they're doing when you're practicing, to what the cues are, not just that affect you, but in the song as a whole, for multiple reasons. One of which being that no matter how good you are, stuff is going to go wrong for someone in the band at some point in some shows. And if you don't know where you're meant to be or where they were meant to be when it happens, you are then again back in that situation of guessing. You're not able to mitigate that. You know, that can very quickly become, rather than being like, oh, that was weird, something happened and we corrected it, or we, you know, vamped on something until it was sorted, that can just become the song's ended, this is a disaster, we need to fix the problem, and it's very obvious to your audience. And I think those visual cues, you know, like say, looking at the face, the eyes are a big one, because for a start, when you have a great moment, the eyes will also be the thing. You know, you have that moment when you lock in and you look at like the drummer and the other guitarist and you're like, this is great. Like, but there'll also be that moment, you know, and I've had it one of a big gig that one of my bands did fairly early on. Because I'm just born to be a nerd, right? So it's a bit of a gig disaster. So we turned up to this pub. And we started playing, and we had this big intro, you know, all very kind of, you know, sort of the very emo-y thing at the time. And then we went into this big riff, and then I come in with this really heavy part and then started to sing. What happened was, I didn't know until that point in time that I was heavily allergic to one of the chemicals that sometimes is put in cheap smoke machines, right? So we start playing, and I'm like, I feel a bit weird. And my face starts to swell up and my throat, because the smoke machine is literally like here blowing in my face. And it was a really, really cheap one. So like nothing comes out and I can't really see either because of the smoke. So then I can't believe I'm telling this story for other people to hear, because it's like a shameful thing between me and that band. Then to top it all off, which is just terrific, the other thing I tell myself is, whatever the hell you do, buy strap locks, because then my strap comes undone. So I go to catch my guitar and headbutt the microphone that I can't see, right? And so, you know, you got this first 30 seconds of a big moment in a song, absolute disaster. But I was really lucky that that's a funny story of me being a nerd, because the other guitarist in my band was far better than me. And he was like, he obviously saw what was going on and was like, okay, cool. Like, so he just basically vamped this whole thing. And so it was only people that were looking at me that was like, what the hell's going on? And we managed to basically turn it into like a long intro of the song while I, you know, put my guitar back on, turned the smoke machine off, had a quick sip of water. You know, it was probably only a, 45-second thing in total, but it felt like a month up there at that point to me. And so then, and then we managed to sort of carry on, and by the sort of second or third song, my voice was back to being okay. I was never the best singer, to be honest with you, but I was doing a job at the time. So yeah, and it's that. And so I think the important thing is just pay attention to everyone around you, because you might be able to help them, they might be able to help you, and you'll just enjoy it more, I guess, is my thing. But how about you? What would be yours?
Don't play guitar. Just become a really good drummer. I really would say that. I would say, and that sounds ridiculous. I know how ridiculous that sounds because of everything like this, but I really feel like if I had just stuck to that, then I don't know. First of all, I would have saved so much money. You can't line your room with drum kits unless you live in a mansion. That's the first thing. But I mean, in all seriousness, I don't know. I would have said, because I learned based on feel and based on the way that we were talking about, of identifying with other musicians, because as the drummer, my job was to carry the guitar player who kind of might not have known what was going on. So I kind of approached it in the same way. Like, I never wanted to step on anybody's toes. I always just wanted to be a part of the band. I would have actually probably told myself to learn to be a little bit more selfish, if anything, when it comes to what I learned and how I implement things. Because sometimes, like, I don't know, I feel like, and there's a lot of parallels between, me and Corey Wong on this channel. It's an ongoing joke, but I feel like I do that too much, just in the way that he does. Like, when I'm actually playing with people, I sit back, and I have no problem sitting back forever. But once in a while, it calls for it, and I'm like, I'm okay. I'll just play my little riffs. It's whatever. I'll just sit in the background. Somebody else do whatever they got to do. The other thing is, piece of advice, not just for me, but in general, is say you have to be so in tune with everybody else. And I'll give you a really good example of this. Okay, if you were playing let's say you're playing a straight cover song, right? And you know that the guitar solo is coming. It doesn't matter what instrument that you're on. Say you're the singer, okay? You're the singer, and you know that after you finish this chorus, the guitar solo is coming in, and maybe it comes in with a big bend. If you don't practice with the band before what you're about to do, and that is to frill on top after that. So the guitar player, for in this example, thinks that it's about to be just him as the focal point right in that first bar, right? The singer then interjecting and adding more to it, that can destroy the momentum of the guitar player. And then he's starting his solo off, or she's starting the solo off like, I'm bewildered. I don't know what's happening at this point. I was not expecting that. I don't know what's going on. And then the worst thing you could do there as the guitar player is freeze. If you're the one that gets caught in that situation, you have to be ready for everything at all times. It's good to learn cues from people like we were discussing, but you also have to learn to sometimes not focus too much on it, because the worst thing you can do, I think this has only happened to me once, and it was when I was very young, is stop mid-song. That is the worst thing anyone could ever do in any band. Never, ever, ever stop. You can always salvage it. Even if it's a rough 20 or 30 seconds, you can salvage it. And you trust me, you will not be remembered as distastefully, especially by the people who do the booking, as somebody who quits in the middle of a song. They won't want anything to do with you after that. They'll be the two things.
Totally. Yeah, always. Yeah, definitely that playthrough thing's massive. Actually, funny enough, I was just thinking that before you said it. That would be the other thing, because I mean, we tended to always play through, like I said, in that story, even that sort of nerd moment. But yeah, I think making sure you continue, you can always kind of find a way around it, and that's kind of good. The only other one I would say, and again, this is something there's like some younger bands that I've sort of seen in local areas recently, is practice how you're going to play at a gig, because the amount of people that still practice in a room facing each other, and then when they have to face an audience, they're more nervous, they don't know the stage setup, they're kind of like, there's not much interaction or confidence. It's kind of like, you know what, like you need to enjoy it, but so practice how you're going to play, and then go and have that confidence, look towards the audience, even if you're too nervous to look at them, look forwards, at points or whatever, interact. Exactly, the magic kind of, and to be honest, in a lot of places that's quite easy, or there's something to look at, particularly a lot of sort of bars and stuff, there's like a t-shirt or someone else's logo somewhere in the, just find a point and just go from there, and just, because it's still a shame when you see some people that are musically very competent, but you won't remember them because they're sort of almost not even as part of the show. When I say looking at your feet, I obviously appreciate some genres that can be seen as very cool or whatever in moments, but that kind of not confident, you can see they're just kind of in their shell, and you're kind of like, you can, if you just presented this a bit better, you'd be so much more memorable. And you can see it's a lack of confidence. And it's sort of, as someone who's a little bit older now, you kind of want to go, guys, enjoy it. This is fun. Like, enjoy it. You can do it. You're holding yourself back a little bit at that point, I think. But
yeah, you're right. And it's nothing worse than that. I would rather watch somebody bash out one of the most basic solos of all time, but do it with gusto and look like they're having fun and move on the stage and interact and smile, than watch somebody play the most impressive piece of guitar, like a Tobin Asai, Bassi rather, or whatever. Oh my God, I feel so stupid. Whatever. You know what I mean here. The guy is an excellent metal progressive player. I'd rather watch somebody not do that and be so proficient and just stare down at the computer, well, I think of it as staring down at the computer, because it's the same thing. You're staring at your guitar, you're doing whatever. There's no life in that. The audience is not going to be connecting with you on that. You go out there, and I think the best example of somebody to learn from for stage presence is somebody like Phil X, because Phil X, it is a whole show. I can highly recommend check out anything Phil X and the Drills live. Not when he plays with Bon Jovi, because obviously it's Bon Jovi and he's like 90 years old trying to sing way out of his registers. At this point, it's not a very good show. But when Phil X plays with the Drills, which is his band, that is it. It's just a three-piece, a trio, and they all so get into it. The whole crowd feeds off the energy. It's the best way of going about doing it. You have to engage with the audience.
Yeah, definitely. And do you know what? Phil X is a great example because he's so infectious. Because he has a very similar. I was actually watching a video I stumbled upon. I don't even know how it happened. I was waiting for something at work, and it was like my lunch break, and I watched a Phil X video when he was demoing a couple of guitars, and one of them was the Firebird, obviously, which I play, and I saw it, and I was like, God, this guy makes me want to buy, like the same as Greg Koch. I'm just like, I want to buy this guitar again that I already own. Like, he's that good and like that infectious that I'm just like, I'd buy this again right now if I could. Like, it's so, which is cool when it's gear you already own. I think that's quite good if you ever get gas. Maybe that's a good way of getting around it. Like, pretend you don't own the thing and like look for your own stuff. It was more, but Phil X is he's fantastic. Yeah, just really, really. I mean, obviously a great player, but that like you say, the stage presence and the just infectious enthusiasm, and that's what you want, right? That's what you want, especially if you're in that kind of rock domain. Like, you want your rock stars, or maybe I'm a bit old fashioned. I want my rock stars to come across like rock stars on stage.
I completely agree. Now, you're never going to believe this. Well, you believe one of the people that I was just listening to a podcast because it was Corey. He had on Yngwie Malmsteen, of all people. Now, I'm not the biggest into that genre of music, as you might tell by the way I play the guitar. But I always try to give some, because I like hearing other people's perspectives. One thing that I was not expecting for him to say, of all people, he said basically at the end of it, Corey asked him for any advice, like what we were just talking about, to aspiring musicians and stuff like that. And he says, first of all, you have to play what you love. And it doesn't matter if what you love is four notes or what you love is technical neoclassical shredding. It's like, you have to own it. You have to embrace what you love, and you have to just become part of it. And you won't enjoy it otherwise. And you also can't look at things as a competition, which, again, from Yngwie Malmsteen, that seems like crazy pills. It seems like crazy pills to play. I don't know if he believes that himself, but what he said was that. And his rationale was the only person he ever saw himself in competition with was himself. And that makes a lot of sense then. If you hold yourself to really that high of a standard, that's a good example of an ego being a good thing. Like, if you truly believe you're the best, then the next album you make, you have to kick your own ass, which means you have to get even better than you already were on an album that you already thought was as good as it could be. So learning to not compare yourself with others, learning to not learn how to do certain techniques for the sake of doing it because it's what's cool to play, or it will make people look at you and say, oh, he's a really good guitar player. What the hell does that mean? That doesn't mean anything. If you can go up and be confident, even just Oasis songs, Weezer songs, who cares? Go out, have fun, own it. Put in the energy, show people that you have passion for what you're playing, whether it's your own original music or cover songs. That will come through to the people that are watching you. That will come through to the people who book you, so that potentially you can start making money. And it comes across with, your own self, because you feel better about it. I don't know.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's such an important message for any player, like, especially if you're owning it. I think this might be a bit of a lazy cliche, but I think a lot of the musicians that I speak to, and the personality traits, we all have that, a tendency to be one end of a spectrum or the other, like where it's kind of, we're either in that like, this is the best thing ever, or we're a little bit lower, or we're doubting ourselves. And I think the best thing is, there's always again, it's another really strange parallel with sport. There will always likely be someone faster than you, or fitter than you, or stronger than you, or whatever the thing is. But I can't control that, but I can damn well make sure that no one believes in what I'm doing more than I do. Like, I can push. That's something that's perfectly within my control. And also, like, sometimes what you like is really interesting. you said about Melstein being on Corey One, because I watched a Stephen Wilson from Porcupine Tree interview, and he often says things that I think are a little bit contentious when you read the headline, but then if you let him elaborate, sometimes it's not as bad. And I feel like it's obviously a marketing ploy, but there was this quote that came out where he said that, you know, he's not a fan of shredding because at that point it's not playing guitar, it's sport. And I was like, okay, what did he actually say? Like, as in, that was clearly like the bit about it. And then when he sort of went on, I understood he was basically saying he thinks that's still fantastic playing, but for him, he doesn't get joy in it. He gets, you know, but that's obviously not the exciting story for, you know, printers or whatever, or, you know, online publications to put out. And that's kind of how I feel. You know, one of my favorite like solo artists, I guess, is Gary Clark Jr. And the thing I love about him is, at no point, even if you were someone who didn't know much about, you were just starting your guitar journey, you could go and find the tab of Gary Clark Jr. And the likelihood is a lot of them are in standard tuning, and nothing he plays, solos aside, but even then, when you get a bit more experience, nothing he plays is particularly complicated, like especially the main riffs or hooks, but which makes it accessible. But the way that he plays it is a really good example of how that sort of, again, that cliche of, you know, your instrument being an extension of yourself, because it's how he articulates himself within those simple notes that appeals to me. That's what I love about his music. I'm just like, Jesus, that bend was absolutely unbelievable, or the little run he did after the bend, you know, just a simple note run, and you kind of go, that is something that I love in music. Like, it's one of those things that I, you know, across any genre, like there's certain things that I really love. I like a lot of dynamics. I love the contrast between quiet and loud. That's something that really gets me. I love, you know, simple melodies. I love intertwining simple melodies. I think that can be really interesting as well. Like, you know, and I think once you start to get these things where you're like, okay, I want to push myself out of my comfort zone. Of course I do. But these are the core things that I absolutely love. I love doing. I love hearing. It makes life feel a lot less pressured. Maybe you can enjoy it a bit more and go, okay, cool. This is like informing how I write. This is what I want to put out there. It's just then about saying what I want to say, or playing how I want to play it, or, you know, and again, recording yourself as well. You know, like I record myself sometimes playing Gary Clark Jr. songs and laugh at how different I play them. But that's good, I suppose, because at least I've got my own. I mean, sometimes it's just not as good, but sometimes it's because, you know, it's my own identity coming out, and I have to be honest about the two. You know, sometimes it's like, oh, that's really cool, that's my style. Sometimes it's like, oh, well, that was a bad day. Like, you know, and you have to, you know, sort of be honest about it, and then, you know, and I think they're all things that can help improve your playing, and, you know, and when you improve your playing, you improve your enjoyment, right? Like, it's kind of, I've never not got better and felt worse about it. So, you know.
Yeah, you brought up two really good things. First of all, and with Gary, it's not intimidating until it's extremely intimidating, because it's not necessarily so in your face. It's like, even he picks really good spots to know when to just rake one chord. Like, he'll just like that one, just to add the emphasis. But he didn't hit a drive pedal. He didn't crank anything. There's no extra effect put in. It's all in the hands. So it's somebody like that's somebody that a lot of people should listen to and aspire to learn. Even if you don't want to play that style of music, just learning how to make the most out of your instrument without adding any other effects or any other things of the matter, because you get a lot of mileage out of that. And then the Steve Wilson thing, that made me laugh that you said that, because two things about that made me laugh. First of all, yes, obviously the headline was, when you play fast, that's not real music, that's sport. And that was clearly going to be the headline, whether he wanted it to be or not. And, you know, the first thing is just like, first, I think the same way as you do. I think, okay, what did he actually say? What's the full quote? Because I know how these guitar publications work. The second thing I thought was, I got to read the comment section. Just because I do YouTube. I know how this is going to go. I know if I made a comment like that, I'd get killed for it. Who the is this guy? Yeah, obviously those who can't say, or those who can't do, you know, they'll criticize. This guy sucks. He's just mad that his band never made it. He's a bitter old dude who's never is a failure. Who even is interviewing him? And I'm just like, oh my God. I'm like, and the thing about it, and this is what I don't like. I like this about the internet, but I don't like this about the internet. It's all anonymous people. It's like meme looking accounts. It's not a real name. It's a guy like with some stupid cat or, or of his guitar, but not him playing it. There's no way to find out who that person is to be like, who are you then to criticize all these other people? It's just the anonymity of the internet, I think, is a beautiful thing, but it can be used for the dark arts, so to speak. And I thought that was a
Yeah.
really good example of that.
Yeah, 100%. And also I think sometimes people lose sight of, it's about engagement. So there's always going to be something like whether people like it or not. And it really makes me laugh when you get someone who's sort of in the comment section who thinks they're being really self-aware, and they're like, he's just saying something controversial, and it's like, yeah, and you've given it the attention that he wanted. If your theory is correct, what you've done is just given them exactly what they wanted. So if you want to stop it, which you're implying by your tone, the no comment option is always an option too, right? Like, and it's kind of funny because one thing that, that did make me laugh when Stephen Wilson, it really made me chuckle. He was talking about chorus effects at one point, and he said, oh no, it's just hideously dated and very 80s. And I laughed out loud when I read it because I was like, are you aware of your career? Like, and the sound of like, and I'm a Porcupine Tree and Stephen Wilson fan. Like, I enjoy his music, like, but I was kind of like, and I laughed, and I just thought at that point you could go into the comments and say, and I was like, he's probably saying that in a tongue-in-cheek way, and even if he's not, it doesn't matter. I've had a laugh out of it. Just let it go. You don't always have to make the comment, and I think that's the other thing about the internet. Not commenting is just as much of as a thing as commenting,
That's
and we
a
get
skill.
it. Yeah, and the amount of times, or to be fair, the amount of times on some things I do start typing a comment, like especially if I found something funny, and then I go, no, because I don't want to have an argument with someone, especially when they perhaps haven't understood that I'm being tongue-in-cheek about it. There's been a lot over here with, the weather. We've got a heat wave, which is obviously incredibly rare for the UK. And so there's like heat warnings, and that's caused all sorts of like controversy because people are complaining. And, they're saying it's just like COVID. It's just designed to keep us inside. And all these theories are coming out.
The heat wave.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. And and I was like, I wanted to be like, are you thinking there's like a heat lamp someone turns up? Like, you are aware? Like, I'm not a fan of government, but I'm pretty sure this is out of their control. But, it's that kind of thing where I sort of laugh. You have to laugh, and you start to engage, or I start to type a comment, and then I have to ask myself the question, like, is this worth my time? And 90% of the time it's not, because I want to use the internet it's a conscious choice that I've made to learn things, to enthuse about gear, and to try and be as positive as possible. It's not always going to be possible, and it's unrealistic to expect that I'm not always happy or anything. But if my contribution to it can be constructive or positive, or trying to just get involved in sort of healthy conversation about stuff and enjoy it and have a bit of a laugh, then I've done well. If it starts to go into that really slippery territory where everything's very negative and confrontational, I don't need that. I need to use it as a de-stress and an information tool, not something to wind me up. So it's just kind of remove myself at that point. But
I take it you're not a member of the gear page?
Do you know what? No, I left it. It will shock you. I do still read things on there from time to time. But the one thing, and to be honest, it's happening a lot on YouTube as well. I was literally I got messages because at one point, and obviously you're going to laugh because I appreciate you hate the specific model of guitar, but I used to play an SG tribute, or special faded, sorry, it was what I had for a while. And I used to get messages on there just bashing Gibson. And I would literally kind of respond to people going, you are aware I'm in no way affiliated. Like, this is just the guitar I could afford and that I gig with. And it's always done me really well. Like, and it was a relatively modest price guitar. So if it got kind of scratched and ding, it wasn't the end of the world to me. And I was like, it's hell with me. I was like, but I get all these things being like, oh, you're a Gibson fanboy. And I remember saying to someone, like, can you explain that? Is that just because I was like, I've also got a Jaguar at this point I had, and I was like, that I play in other photos, and I'm like, what, like, you're literally, and I just found it really interesting, and it's happening, like, it seemed to be a real thing to kind of bash certain companies, but I found it really curious when I'm like, I'm a guy on the internet, like on the gear page with like next to no one talking to me, like it's clear I'm not a celebrity or in any way affiliated. Yeah, and I'm kind of like, and you're talking to me like I'm like the president of Gibson's son or something. I'm like, I don't know. Like, if you don't like Gibson guitars, absolutely fine. Bash the hell out of them. That doesn't really, but I just thought it was really strange. So it got to the point where I was getting so many comments about certain things. I just was like, oh, no, it's just not for me. I just, went to a different community, really.
Yeah, that's funny you say that. And I mean, yes, it's well documented that I despise the Gibson SG. But one thing I don't do, I don't tell people not to play them. I don't say you should never play this guitar. If you like an SG, that's great. I don't care. But the only time I will tell people not to buy something is if it's a piece of shit counterfeit replica guitar. And that has gotten me into, I've gotten some very nasty remarks about this and people trying to justify it. I mean, I don't want to get into a whole thing, but I'll just focus on the point that like you can't control some of the negative stuff. And the thing is, like, I'm very outspoken with a lot of things, not just on that topic, but if I feel passionately about something, I don't care. I'm not going to delete the video. I'm going to let you can hear my opinion. If you agree with it, that's cool. If you don't agree with it, that's cool too. But sometimes, I mean, there's definitely fallout from it, and there's some shrapnel that hits. It's not fun, but I mean,
Yeah.
that's part of the internet, man.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It's one of those things you have to kind of take the rough with the smooth. Like I say, the bit that I control is just what I engage with, and because I think that's my responsibility to myself. But aside from that, you know, and like I say, I totally respect different opinions. I find tribalism inherently interesting because obviously you get it a lot in football, you know, and you make it, you know, and you get it a lot in gear, and it's like you do this, and it's like, do you know what? I bought this guitar. I love this guitar. I'm not asking you to love this guitar, but you know, you could at least appreciate the fact that I'm really enjoying playing it. Like, and I hope you're, you know, if you're in terms of this sort of community, if you're playing an instrument, guitar or whatever, and you love the instrument and it's maybe something you aspire to and you got, then happy days. Like, congratulations to you. Loads of people play guitars I absolutely wouldn't want to touch with a barge pole, but it's like, if they get the enjoyment out of it, amazing. Like, you know, that's what it's about. And it's like anything else. If we were all into exactly the same stuff, it would be very bland very quickly. So like, it's, you know, but I find the need to kind of I think it's a need to compete, actually. I think especially when the anonymity is there, it's a need to be like, my shiny toy is better than yours, you know, my football player is better than yours, my guitar player like is better than, and you kind of go, okay, cool, like I'm really glad you're proud of what you've got, but like I was just, you know, drinking a cup of coffee, going about my business. I couldn't give a like, in the nicest possible way, I couldn't give a shit. Like, it's just kind of, you know, but it is what it is. I think, you know, and like say, if you're going to be on a platform like on the internet or engaging with anyone, you have to take the rough with the smooth. The only thing I have to be careful with is I've got sometimes a very tongue-in-cheek sense of humor that can be mistaken for opinion, so I have to remember to make that really abundantly clear or not do it, because I don't, you know, I can't be bothered to explain or get into, you know, long-winded debates about something that I maybe said clearly as a bit of a joke, you know.
Yeah, I have that problem constantly, because if you ever, like, when I'm talking to you, like, you could tell when I'm kidding around, or if I say something tongue in cheek, I'll make like a face or whatever. I'll make the mistake of making a comment in the same exact way. But if you just take it at face value and don't know that's how I'm approaching it, it can come across as real bad. It can come across as real bad. So it's just, you got to take all these things into consideration. But we're really similar in that aspect for sure.
Yeah, definitely. It's a pitfall. But like I say, it's fun. It's, you know, it's fun, and I think as long as it's, you know, people. I mean, that's why it's nice to have communities where people are, you know, on at least enough of a level to understand that, I think, and then you can have a bit more fun. But it's like anything else. Ironically, bringing it back to like playing music with other people, it's all about context, isn't it? Everything's always about the context in which you're in and who you're around and all those considerations, because, you know, stuff can spiral really quickly. If you take me out of context, sometimes I don't go down well. Like, it just is what it is, you know. It's kind of...
Oh, I can't say anything. I know what you're talking about. That's really, really, really funny. But yeah, no, sometimes it's just, you have to read a room. You have to, it's the same, and it is. It really goes back to what you were talking about. What we started this with was, and I am not sure how I'm going to actually edit this intro, because we were just ranting about things we hated when we were training right before playing 5 and 7 aside. And then I transitioned it because I was like, this is perfect. This is great. But reading the room, man, and understanding how to communicate with others in general. If you can't even communicate with people on the internet and do that at a decent level, how the hell do you expect to do it with other creative people in a musical environment? I don't know. Life skills, difficult things.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's hard as well because it often speaks about, you know, the psyche of the people around. I think sometimes people when you're coming from a place. And again, I think because the internet's so quick, I think it gives you a chance to really, it's the ultimate speaking before thinking platform. And sometimes by thinking, I more mean self-reflection rather than about the topic, because there are times when you might go to say something and it's sort of linked to deeper things, like in terms of like sometimes I have to ask myself, is like, am I just in a really, really bad mood today? Like, stuff's maybe happened, I'm stressed, I haven't slept, whatever. And you kind of go, yeah, like, so maybe don't comment then, maybe go back to that, like when you're on at least on a level, if that's still your opinion, fine, but maybe just take a little break, and I think sometimes that self relationship is really important, and it feels to me like sometimes it's missing from people, like, and you get it a lot with critique about anything, whether it's creative or whatever. You'll get something very dismissive rather than constructive, and it's like constructive's fine, if you don't like something, if it's just subjectively you don't like it, that's also fine. Again, I find that a bit weird to go out your way to comment on when you could just listen to something else, for example, but fine, that's okay if you want to, it's part of the internet. But I kind of think if you're gonna go to the trouble of commenting, maybe put like some sort of constructive, like what you didn't like or what you do like or how you'd have done it differently, even if you then still disagree with the person. At least it's a more interesting debate, like, because the great thing about anything is, especially like music and creative stuff, is we could all play the simplest 4 power chord progression and loads of us would play it differently. Yeah, and like so people would play it differently, and people would articulate it differently and accent it differently, and the tone would be different. And we've made, consciously or subconsciously in that process, loads of decisions, like more than you ever realize. And that's the one thing I always say about recorded music. Like, the fascinating thing about recorded music for me, like live music's its own thing and it's magical, but like when you're committing something to tape, to use the old parlance, I find it really interesting that what you hear is thousands of conscious and subconscious decisions that were made in perhaps the spur of the moment. And sometimes they, especially when money and time and stuff are consideration. And what you've got is a real timestamp of like so many variables in that. And there's a magic to that for me that I really appreciate. And like when people have crafted an album, like a whole piece of work, and I'm thinking, wow, they've then, there's enough variables just per song, but then to think about it as a whole body of work, I think that's a really magical thing to me. Like, I think sometimes it's easy to overlook that and just go, well, I didn't like it, so it's crap, like, which we all do, and it's fine. But it's kind of like, yeah, I don't know. It's maybe that's me being a bit too diplomatic, but sometimes I just think, well, I'll go and listen to something and then be like, appreciate where it got to where it got to. I think sometimes.
Yeah, you don't need to bash, and like even if you don't like something, I mean, there's been albums by bands that I do like a lot, that I've thought to myself afterwards, I'm like, I wish you never made that album. I really wish you never made that album. But that doesn't mean I'm gonna stop listening to the rest of the band's stuff because of it. Like, you don't need to hate everything that came before it because of one. It's just like, it's the same thing as somebody has an opinion that goes against your opinion, and no matter what the topic is, like, you're gonna just discredit all the other positive stuff and all the other stuff you agree on and focus on the one negative thing. I feel like, I don't know. I don't like that. It's just about culture in general. That could be taken for deeper than what it is. But really, I'm trying to talk about it just in terms of music and stuff like that. But yeah, there's a lot to do with it. I have set up a rig right now to record this week, and I've never done it like this, in this way. It's very interesting. I will tell you more about it off air, and we'll talk more about it in detail because we've already done this. This is really strange for me. I have to FaceTime my daughter right now. And I know how crazy that sounds to some people, but this is the first time she's been away from home, and I keep getting text messages from it. She's in New York with my parents, and she's gonna be gone for the week, which is part of the reason I'm like, okay, I gotta record now. So I do have to wrap this up, but I wanted to say thank you. This is great. The next time we do this, I don't know. We want to make a very long video about the band Incubus, where we go over everything from the beginning to the end as far as the discography, songs we like, stuff like that. But I also do want to talk more. Maybe I'll just talk to you in private about about what I'm doing here, for how I'm recording this it's very, very, very strange for me. But I don't know. Some people maybe in the modern world be like, you're finally doing something modern. Be like, it feels dirty. But I don't know. Is there anything I know I just tangented at the end there, but I just got like 80 things on my head. So is there anything you'd like to add to this to wrap this up?
No, just thanks for having me. And like on board again, it's obviously always great to chat to you. I'm definitely keen to learn about this now, especially when you said modern. I'm like, that's my interest really peaked. I'm not gonna lie, because I did not expect that.
I have 4 of the same signal, technically the same signal. Some are amped, some are not. 4 being recorded together. Okay. So some with microphones, some without microphones. Yeah, okay. We'll talk about it next time. Thank you all for listening to this. I hope that you made it through that opening analogy, because that was so good. It was so good. It was a perfect transition to learn to play well with others. Don't always focus on yourself. Don't be the cocky player that falls down, gets two studs up tackles because you're playing like a dick. Don't do that. Thank you all for watching this podcast. Yeah, we'll see you on the next one. Take it easy.